I am going to convene the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board's meeting of Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. The board will accept public comment on any agenda item or any other matter under its jurisdiction. Speakers are asked to limit their testimony to approximately 5 minutes on each agenda item and on any other matter under its jurisdiction not listed on the agenda. The order of the agenda items may be changed to accommodate the board or the public. There's one preliminary item that I need to bring up to the board. Dear colleagues, due to a medical procedure limiting my ability to travel, I'm requesting the board's approval to participate remotely. So I would ask for the board to basically grant me the permission to participate remotely due to my medical procedures that I'm undergoing.
I have no objection.
I make that motion.
Yeah. Oh, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. So will the board members vote on it, please?
I vote aye.
Wachowski, aye.
Kent Monning, aye.
Thank you. There's one other item that prior to beginning our meeting is that I'm required under the law to disclose whether there's any other individual with me in my office this morning. And I'm pleased to tell you I'm quite alone in my office with no other individual in my office today. So with that, we'll begin our meeting, and we'll begin our meeting with a roll call. So I'll begin with a roll call. Michael Allen, present.
Mike Ing, present.
Robert Wachowski, present.
Laura Kent Monning, present.
So I'll make the board report. Board members and the public and the staff, we've had a wonderful month. We've been very productive. Since the last board meeting, the board closed out over 1,503 cases, of which 1,039 were in CAMS and 464 in our legacy system. So we've had a very good month in terms of doing cases. And for the benefit of the public, we meet once monthly, but the vast majority of the time is spent by the board in hearing and listening to cases and then deciding them. And the CAMS refers to the California Appeals Management System when we talk about CAMS. And the legacy system was the system we've used for many years to do cases. So other than that, I would like to report that I was able to visit our San Diego office since our last meeting. It was really a pleasure to meet the staff down there and check out the operation. It was quite impressive, and I was given a very warm welcome, and I appreciated being able to visit one of the offices. It's my hope over the next couple of years I'm going to be able to visit all the offices and get to know all the staff of our agency. So that's my report. I'd ask other board members if they have reports.
If it's timely, could I also move approval of the minutes?
Sure. So we have a motion for the approval of the minutes. So let's do the voting on this. Kent Monning?
Aye.
Member Ing?
Aye.
Member Wachowski?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So we've approved the minutes. Thank you. Thank you for that. I skipped over that with the chair's report. So I'd like to do the board members' reports now. So which of the board members would like to report first? How about our vice chair?
Thank you, Chair Allen. I have no report this month. Thank you.
Any other board member Ing or member Wachowski?
I would just like to echo what our esteemed chair usually starts off our meeting with the voice of tremendous appreciation for everyone on the CUIAB team who makes it possible for us to render our decisions each and every day, whether it's rain or snow or IT or COVID. The team has pulled together, and I was not sure if I would make it today, but because everything else worked, I am here today. I'm eternally grateful to have that honor to be here in person. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Believe me, we appreciate your attendance. Member Wachowski?
I have no report this month.
Member Wachowski, no report, but a happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
So with that, what I would ask is, do we have any public comment?
Buck, I have no hands raised for public comment at the, oh, I just got a hand raised. I do have a hand raised for public comment.
Sure.
Put your hand down.
Would you like me to allow that person to talk at this time?
Yes, and they should understand that the board will not respond to the comments, and they're limited to 5 minutes. I'd ask our vice chair to time it, but we're most open to the comments, and let's hear what the public has to say.
Mr. Dennis Green Jr., please announce yourself to the board and begin your comment.
Good morning, board.
Morning.
My name is Dennis Green Jr., and I was just coming to make a public comment. See if the board would also consider in their decisions other things that's being passed in bills, as I have researched and went through going through my appeal, in which I am currently going to this Bay Area district before I could even reach you guys. I'm hoping that you guys can consider the things that are being passed on bills in this state of California, as it deals with things from the past in California. As we are homelessness, education, employment, and equality is being looked at. I'm hoping that you guys can take that in consideration when you review my case, as it's very complex. But I feel as it is a very key point into other things that are being passed in today's time. I have been dealing with homelessness and shelter living based on some complex issues that you guys are having to look at that deals with temporary time. And I'm hoping that you guys can also come up with new systems, modifications when having to deal with these new times, as employment has changed since 1936, and we're in 2024. And I know you guys went through a very tough time, through America's time during the pandemic, and I know there was a lot of pressure on you guys to handle a lot of these lives in your hands as far as getting help to others that may have been impacted, which, like I said, impacts their eating, sleeping, education, and employment. During this time also of the pandemic, there was people like myself that went without the benefit and or was paid late. But as in my case, not all that I feel I should deserve. But as you look at, like I said, as you review my case, I'm hoping that you can understand with a thought and a thought of companionship where we can make change into times that we're living in today. Even as we can look back at the times, make sure we look at today's time. As I represent temporary workers, I worked a lot of temporary jobs in my life, but also worked a lot of corporate jobs, some of them temp jobs. And maybe with the new way that we're going about hiring in the United States, more specifically California, but California is a high influence to other states, as the numbers and data will show, that we can make changes that will help those that may need it. And that's all I have to say. And I'm hoping that my case will be considered and truly looked at in this complex capacity that it has created. And I thank you for your time, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Sir, thank you for taking the time to address us. Thank you very much.
And I have no further hands raised for public comment.
Okay, then we'll proceed with the rest of the meeting. The next item on our agenda is the report from our Chief Executive Director and Chief Judge, Michael Kutry. So you want to give us a report?
Good morning, Chair Allen and board members. I'm going to start with our field office updates and workload and timeliness, and then I'm going to give a very brief update on behalf of Mr. Willoughby, who's not present today. In January, with all of our field office cases transitioned fully into CAMs, the field offices closed 30,631 cases. The open inventory, as you'll note in the materials you were given, grew by approximately 1,241 cases. That brings the open inventory to 80,093 cases in unemployment and pandemic unemployment assistance. It's the first time we've seen an increase, so let me give you a little bit of background. There's always a pipeline of cases coming from EDD, and so it changes every day. Because of some of the staffing impacts that we've had over the last couple of years, we've had a little bit of a backlog in receiving and processing those cases and getting them ready for appeal hearings. But because of the flexibility that we've discussed as a group over the last couple months that CAMS gives us, we've been able to grab more of those cases in the last month than ever before and move them to places where they can be processed the fastest. So remember, Wachowski, you and I had an exchange in the last couple of meetings about some of those efficiencies in CAMS, and this is a highlight of that. So while we didn't receive a markedly higher amount of appeals in that pipeline from EDD between the last meeting, we were able to grab some of those and prepare them faster for hearing. So it appears that our inventory has grown, but in actuality, those appeals are going to get heard one way or the other, and so they become open in our status faster. So we'll see a little fluctuation in those numbers over the next couple of months as we utilize that increased flexibility. And for perspective, we've talked about our ability to move cases rapidly in CAMS. Between the last meetings, we moved 2,000 cases that were ready for hearing to an office that could hear them fastest, but we moved almost 23,000 cases for that registration process that I just discussed. That's never been done before. That would have involved packaging and mailing 22,900 case files. And now we can do that digitally with a push of a couple buttons. So that's the perspective on why our inventory grew a bit in the last month. The case aging has dropped markedly. As you will recall, over the last year, it's stuck between 120 and 145 days average case age in our inventory, and dropped to 109.2 days for January. Part of that is that we're closing out the legacy system, and so some of those cases that are old in that legacy system are being closed out. Some of that difficulty is that we've been reporting out of two systems, which is an incredibly challenging endeavor. So our IT and our subject matter experts have done their best to normalize that and to make those numbers accurate, but now we're pivoting to just the one system, and so our data is much easier to get, much faster to get, and much more accurate. So we look forward to that continuing to drop. Our inventory drops, our case age drops, and for additional perspective, the national case aging is dropping as well, and it's down to 200 days. So we're still stacking up quite favorably, but I think 2024 is finally the year where we see that drop. Hopefully see that plummet down to normal times. On CAMS, an important development that was achieved since the last meeting is that we provided our Spanish user interface. So that became live on January 31st. It allows a member of our portal who is Spanish speaking to experience the full, all the prompts and all the language in our portal in their native language by selection, and you can toggle back and forth. So we finished the translation of the content and all of the work that IT had to do to program that into our portal. one of the biggest benefits to this development is that we can now roll in other languages without having to recreate the programming. So we're in the process of engaging Vietnamese interpreting professionals to duplicate the content that we did in Spanish into Vietnamese, and then we can load that into our existing portal. So we're hopeful to have that next language done by April. After that, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, and Tagalog are next in order, and that order is determined by our user base. So by percentage of our users who converse in those languages, who come to us in those languages. We will continue down that process. As you may know, EDD is on a very ambitious project in accessing or offering different language access options to parties, and their goal, I believe, is 20 languages. So we're just going to follow their suit because now we have the framework and process to load those languages into our portal. After all the hard work we talked about by the IT team and subject matter experts for their field office rollout, they were rewarded with another high-intensity flurry of IT activities. So we have a number of enhancements that are in the works right now. So those teams are working really hard to get those prioritized. Tax is coming up. We're having to work with EDD on that process. It's a lot different than how we receive unemployment files. So it's while the platform of CAMS will be very usable in tax, the process of getting the files and transmitting the files back and forth from EDD is a lot different. Those additional language offerings that I discussed are a high priority for the agency. We have a number of administrative processes within the system that needed overhaul and revision or enhancement, and so those are underway also, which include calendaring and some board-specific updates, which you as the users will experience very soon. I have no security incidents to report since the last meeting, which is a great development, and that ends my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So board members, any questions?
I have a question, if I may. You indicated that in the field office, we've seen this growth or expansion of 81,000 cases. And I've got, we get our monthly little trends on the appellates division, and it looks like the balance of our cases has gone down to 661, which is, at least all the time that I've been here, it's quite low. What should I anticipate in the balance of cases if the field office is increased now and CAMS is becoming more efficient? How is that going to affect the workload here at the appellate level? Or what do you anticipate it? Because it looks like we're sort of cleaned out a bunch of back cases and we're at low level.
Generally, the percentage of parties that take a board appeal hovers by a couple percentage points, and Judge Bach's been doing that portion of it a lot longer than I am, so a lot longer than I have, so I'll let her add to that. As our case volume decreases because we have fewer appellants, I would certainly expect board appeals to go down. And so you're probably seeing that trend mimic the field. So our population of cases is going down, and so will appellate operations.
And I've noticed, I've only been here for a year, but in the pandemic unemployment, we had a lot of appellate cases that came in, which I'll refer to as document cases, where they were told at the field hearing that they should bring in their documents, and then 3 months later they come up with their ID or their proof of their residency or whatever it is to get the benefits. I guess as PUA cases go away, that would just evaporate. That's not the normal appeal that we have from an employment case or a work case.
The two buckets of work that really changed during the early and middle part of the pandemic were the ID verification cases, where EDD found fault with the identity proof that was provided, and also the documentation cases for the PUA cases. And those certainly have tailed off dramatically. They make up a much, much smaller portion of our case volume now, and probably that will stay the course for many years without some other major event where the EDD scrutinizes the paperwork provided by the claimants.
Thank you. That's all, Chair Allen.
Any other questions from board members?
I had a question.
Vice Chair Allen, Vice Chair Allen, Member Eng had a question.
I had a
also.
question. I'm not sure.
Sorry, you didn't say you remember any, go ahead.
Yeah. And also, if Vice Chair Kent Monning had a question, I didn't want to get ahead of her. But my question, first of all, kudos on the language access onto our portals. That's been extremely important, and the fact that we're onboarding a major language that's used by the majority of those that require bilingual or that language assistance. It's a very large step forward, and to know that Spanish, and I think you said Chinese, is in the next steps. My question relates to the EDD documentation that is often used as part of the case notes and then relied upon by the field to make those decisions. Is there a particular protocol in terms of which EDD documents, if the claimant, if any of the parties requests another language, is there a particular protocol that requires the evidentiary file that the field and the appeals judges and we would eventually see as far as any of the documents, or is that just dependent on whether that's by chance included in the case file?
We don't control the document. EDD as a party submits the transmittal to us with with what they include. We do have higher level conversations with EDD about what we think ought to be included. They as a party still have that responsibility to decide what they're going to send our way. So whether we get something, I think what you're asking is whether we get the translated version of that in the file, whether that's something we should expect. I have seen it in some cases, and I have not seen it in some cases, and I would like to see it certainly where it becomes relevant based on the testimony of the party. But we are at the mercy of that party submitting evidence to us.
And I suppose the board, through yourself representing us or anyone else that can request that from EDD as far as those documents to be included in the case files, or
We can certainly
we can always ask.
We can certainly
yes.
engage in that conversation
Okay.
and indicate that we feel that a higher level of document transmission would be appropriate.
And just to go back to our presidential mandate, I believe you referenced the fact that the requirement for other language or translations is based on legislation. Would you mind summarizing what that legislation required of EDD?
Sure.
And what year
I'm not
that
able to
was?
cite it exactly because I don't
And
have
what
it in
year
front of
that
me,
was? Uh-huh.
but I can provide that to you. Essentially, EDD has been legislatively mandated to dramatically increase their language offerings, and that there's an actual list of languages that are to be implemented. I know that EDD is in the midst of that process. I don't know what their progress towards that end goal currently looks like, but quite literally, they have thousands of forms that they utilize, and they're in the process of expanding that. There are several benchmarks to be made. I believe one has 8 languages, core languages, and I think there's another one that has over 20. And so they have different deadlines as when they have to get there. So I don't know if they're going to make it or not, but I know that they're engaged on a daily basis in increasing those offerings. But I can get you the text of those bills so that you can take a look at them.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and my final question, thank you for your report. I wanted to also preface the fact that wanted to express my thanks for your stewardship of the CAM's onboarding and the daily operations of our field office, which includes, we see you here at this office, but we know that your work extends throughout all the field offices throughout the state. We really appreciate that. My last question relates to the part of the decisions that we have advised about the late pandemic filing cases, that in the event that we rule that unemployment insurance benefits or other types of benefits are not available, the claimant may possibly wish to consider filing a late pandemic claim within 21 days. Two parts to my question is, have any of the claimants availed themselves, as far as you know, of that provision? And number two, when do you see the day when we would have, we're at 1% now, but no further pandemic cases, if any? Not that I'm not wanting to see them, I just wanted to kind of look down the pipeline.
We still receive new pandemic unemployment assistance, or PUA, appeals. And some of those are folks who have recently filed claims. So we do have a strong showing that there are still being processed by the EDD. That leads into the second part of your question, is when will they end? We do anticipate that that the U.S. Department of Labor will put a firm cap date on that. It's not happened yet. What they typically do is they poll all the states to find out how many pending claims in PUA do you have and how many pending appeals do you have, and to ask for a projection of when those already in the works will end, and then they make a determination as to how long they should keep the funding open for it. So until we receive a pronouncement from the U.S. Department of Labor, those claims will remain in processing.
Okay, well, thank you. I will continue to retain all my pandemic training documents, of which I have about 4 or 5 inches worth, and happy to continue to look at them. That means that
Thank you.
those that need them are still getting the benefits. Thank you. Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Monty, you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair Allen. No questions, just thank you to Chief Kutry for ongoing support and updating on IT's behalf as well. And I did want to just add on and thank the IT department for the board-specific enhancements that are continuing to be worked on. The first round that we received, I think, have really improved our ability to work together, the two panelists, on the cases that we review. That's been fantastic, and I look forward to the next round of improvements coming to continue to enhance our ability to review our cases as best we can. So just wanted to share my thanks for that. And of course, thrilled to hear about the rollout of the Spanish access on the portal. That's fantastic. And to see the long list of languages being added as well. I think we've been so in it for a long time, but that is a huge, huge change that CAMS has allowed us now to have the public interfacing with their cases and with our agency in a way that didn't exist at all before CAMS. So I just want to highlight that and my appreciation to everyone who's made that happen. Thank you.
Just Kutry, the only thing I would add, and it's really been well said and by the other board members, is that to me, we have such a diverse population in California, so many different cultures and languages, and I just think it's really admirable what's happening in terms of actually taking the steps, all the work that has to be done to actually make us more, realize the goal of trying to make us user-friendly for all these different cultures and languages. I think it's incredible. And to me, with being on the board, it's been a really huge undertaking for a long time, and it's been undertaken during a time of the pandemic and a lot of the crises we've gone through in the last couple of years. So I thank you for the report, and just thank the staff for the wonderful work that's being done on all the levels.
Well, thank you.
So with that comment, I would move to our supervising administrative law judge for appellate operations, Rebecca Bach, and ask for Rebecca's report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Allen, and good morning to everyone, and happy birthday to Member Wykowski. So for the month of January, appellate operations or second level appeals was to meet Department of Labor guidelines to close 50% of our cases in 45 days. It's really for the year, actually. In January, we closed 24% of our cases within 45 days, bringing our year average to 41.6, which I think is a pretty strong showing for this year. And we are also to meet our Department of Labor guidelines to close 80% of our cases within 75 days, of which we closed in January 34.3%, leaving our year-end total at 63.7%. And then also our case aging is an interesting one. We're supposed to have an average case age of 40 days or less to meet Department of Labor guidelines. Currently, or at the end of January, our case aging was at 64.8, a marked improvement from our peak last month when it was at 82.6. So that is headed in the right direction. Also, I believe that you're going to see a marked improvement next month and the month after that. So overall, I would say we're not quite at the Department of Labor guidelines, but we're pretty close. And that is impressive considering we have been coming out of COVID, one, and two, the move into CAMS. I would like to report that all except for 2 administrative law judges are now 100% working in CAMS, and one of those 2, which is retired Nudent, I'm training into CAMS this afternoon, so that will leave 1 full-time in legacy. So we're making a great move, and we're easily flowing into CAMS, which is wonderful, thanks to the help of IT, of course. And then finally, as this report does not show, there's also been a lot of work done with tax cases recently. You might have noticed a few of those coming through. And so overall, I'm pleased. I hope you are. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Judge Bach. Do any of the board members have questions?
No.
None for me.
Well, no question. Judge Bach, I would just like to say, tell your appellate judges to go easy on themselves, be patient with themselves. Some of them who think that they're going to not make errors or have problems with the system, they just have to be patient with themselves. And I try to encourage the judges when I work with them to understand that we're all struggling with the new technology. It's one thing to struggle with the cases in the law. It's quite another to be struggling with the technology simultaneously. So just encourage them that it's a learning process for all of us.
Will do, yes.
Having said that, we'll move on. We'll get the report from Robert Silva, our Chief Administrative Services Officer, an update on administrative services.
Thank you, Chair Allen. Good morning, everybody. I'll quickly go over our hiring efforts such as they were since the last board meeting. I'd reported at the last board meeting we were expecting to onboard a couple of support staff. I think there were 3, but 2 of them did not pass name clearance and we were unable to hire them. We were only able to hire 1 person since the last board meeting, and she isn't scheduled to report to our Inglewood office until May of this year, so it's a kind of a hire, a delayed hire. We currently have 24 support recruitments pending. We did just this week receive our annual notice that the majority of the state Cal cards, which are the credit cards that we use to purchase the majority of our office supplies, they'll be temporarily toggled off on May 10th, 2024, to prepare for the fiscal year-end processing and accounting closure. CUIAB has 8 of these card holders, and all but 2 of those cards will be turned off on May 10th, and then those remaining 2 will be toggled off on June 7th for the remainder of the fiscal year. With that directive, we're actively working with local managers to process mission-critical orders that obviously adhere to the rules of the current expenditure freeze before these cards get shut down temporarily, and procurement would begin again probably late July, early August of the approaching fiscal year. We've reported on the expenditure freeze in recent board meetings, and I'll let you know that over the past 2 months that it's been in place, local managers have quickly gotten the hang of requesting items that fit within the 3 mission-critical categories from which we're allowed to actually procure items. We have built in a second level of review to act as somewhat of a gatekeeper for the majority of these procurement requests. That happens to be me. And I have had a marked decrease of back and forth with local managers in February because they're understanding the gravity of the expenditure freeze. There's also a mechanism in place in which we can request exemptions to the purchasing freeze through labor agency, but we haven't yet had to explore that option. Moving on to budget call letter requests for the coming fiscal year. Let me see, on January 18th, we released the personnel, and operating expense budget call letters for the 2024-25 state fiscal year to the management of the 18 CUIB cost centers. This is our annual process of providing the opportunity for each branch to be involved with the budgetary process and to submit requests for positions, promotions, equipment, furniture, contracts, facility upgrades, things of that nature for the upcoming fiscal year. The budget call letter requests for field operations were due this last Friday, February 16th, and those for the remaining 4 cost centers are due tomorrow, Ms. Bach. Once we have everything tomorrow, we we will then be consolidating all of the requests for operating expenses and equipment for review and approval. What we typically do each February and March is review the current year expenditures to determine whether it's possible to move some of those approved operating expense items into the current year for purchasing. And we want to do that before the cutoffs for procurement this year. But with the purchasing freeze in place, we would obviously have to ensure that they would be of an immediate mission critical need to move them into the current fiscal year. And if they're not of an immediate mission critical need, then we will budget for them in the coming 2024-25 fiscal year. And that is my report. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Any questions from board members?
Yeah, I had a question. I'm not sure if anyone else does, but
Go ahead.
thank you, Chair Allen. First of all, thank you for the report. Referencing the last meeting in which I'd requested a copy of the COVID guidelines for California. I understand that the CDC is now moving to emulate your policy, Mr. Silva, or the state's policy, I'm sorry. Is that the reason why even though COVID is still with us, is it true we have not had to close down a single office?
We haven't had an office closure in more months than I can remember. It's been a very, very long time. Yes.
I think the policy that you had informed us is that 24 hours of, if you test positive and 24 hours later you have no symptoms, you can wear a mask and you don't have to shelter and pay, you don't have to be isolated. Was that what the policy was?
Yes, somewhat. It's a minimum of 24 hours from the onset of symptoms or a positive test if asymptomatic.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you have to be fever-free for that 24-hour period. And the symptoms have to be mild and resolving.
Okay, thank you. And the issue of having any furloughs and hiring freeze, that's been unchanged since the last month, is that right?
It's been unchanged since the last month. There's been no further talk of hiring freeze. Specifically for CUIAB, Department of Finance has essentially come out and said that the administration won't be accepting budget change proposals for increased funding through the May revision. So we're operating on the October revision figures as we move into the 2024-25 fiscal year. What that means for us, based on the data we submitted back in October, is we're projecting a 1.3 position decrease for the coming fiscal year. So essentially business as usual, barring, a significant change like the one you just mentioned.
Right. Okay, well, that's unfortunate to hear about that decrease in that position, but also appears to be something that we've managed before.
Absolutely.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Chair Allen.
Any further questions from board members?
No questions.
No questions. Well, Mr. Silva, could you refresh our memory as to what proportion of our budget is carried by the federal government?
It's roughly 91%.
So it's that 9% with the state budget that's in jeopardy because of the ongoing situation here in California. Thank you. So I would ask our board counsel, do we have any closed session business to conduct?
Thank you, Chair Allen. We do not today.
So before I conclude this meeting, I'd like to first thank the board for accommodating me with my medical issues that I'm having. And I want to wish my vice chair a speedy recovery. She looks like she's a little bit under the weather, and so I hope she feels better. And I want to thank all the staff at all levels of the agency and our executive staff for this meeting. And having said that, if there is no further business, we'll conclude this meeting and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Allen.